Okay, we'll get going with tonight's presentations. So, welcome everybody, all of our attendees and our two panelists to this evening's debate. We're going to go. It's not a debate; it's a presentation, I guess. We're going to go for about an hour on this, and to include some questions, a questioning opportunity for the public here as well. My name is Paul Towle. I'm president and CEO of the Aroostook Partnership, and we're pleased to be able to do this because this is a big project that's potentially coming up down in southern Aroostook, sort of northeastern Penobscot County, really. And but Houlton would be a service area for this project, so it would certainly impact us to that degree, economically, and also, as you may hear, there's some concerns with environmental issues. So we certainly want to be able to give these two gentlemen some time to present what they have going on, some of their facts and opinions about the project. So that's what we'll do this evening. Also sponsoring with us is the Greater Houlton Chamber of Commerce and Southern Aroostook Development Corporation. So I'm pleased to have them partner with Aroostook Partnership to be able to bring you this. And again, we're doing this so we can inform the public. We can get the folks that are in the most know to present their ideas about this. So we, as the public, who would be most impacted from this, can form an opinion about whether we want to support or help try to oppose a project like this. So the best way to do that is go to the sources that have the most information about it. So that's what we hope to accomplish this evening. And with us tonight we have two presenters. And the first is Jeremy Ouellette. He's Vice President of Project Development for Wolfden Resources Corp. And second, we have Nick Bennett, who is Staff Scientist and Healthy Waters Director for Natural Resource Council of Maine. So we will welcome panelists. And why don't we kick this off first with Jeremy presenting Wolfden's mining project. So Jeremy, go ahead, take it away.
Great. Thanks very much, Paul. Once again, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen in, as well as the Aroostook Partnership and its partners on setting up the meeting. I think it's a great idea and a great way to get transparency out there about the project. I'm going to share a slideshow here. It should be working. So once again, my name is Jeremy Ouellette. I'm the Vice President of Project Development with Wolfden Resources Corporation. The project that we're talking about today, per Paul's comment, is the Pickett Mountain project. It is bordering the Penobscot and Aroostook counties, but set up into the Penobscot County mainly. So I guess what I wanted to do is kind of bring everybody through, first and foremost, why mining in Maine? Why is it important? And then run through, the project itself, Pickett Mountain, the aspects of it, what it involves. And then finally, I want to talk about, Paul mentioned it already, but I want to talk about the impacts of the project. And I think I think there's obviously some pros and cons there. But ultimately, I want to run through those the data that we have on them. So project location. So the Pickett Mountain deposit is located around 9 miles north of Patten, Maine, in T6R6. So if you're driving up Route 11, you can see sort of the red line here on the right of the screen. You drive north from Patten on Route 11, and then you would end up turning left. It's about 5 miles into the woods from Route 11. So the property itself, Wolfden owns this sort of orange block. It's around 7,000 acres. And what we're looking to do is rezone a small portion of that outlined in black, an area into a planned development type of zoning, where we could develop a mining and concentration project. So some high levels around the project. It's it's good year-round access. The project and the design that we propose is a zero pollutant discharge, and that goes for air, water, etc. So far, the local communities, I've had the opportunity to communicate with a lot of different of the communities and businesses within the communities as well. Groups like ATV clubs nearby, different schools, as well as the patent selectmen as well. So I think we do have a lot of that local good support. And in addition to that, a very responsive set of state regulators with the Land Use Planning Commission, as well as the DEP, to a point where there was a recent bill to ban mining in Maine, and regulators within the state voted unanimously against the bill. And I think that really goes to speak to the infrastructure and the robustness of the regulations in place today. So the Pickett Mountain itself is a high-grade polymetallic deposit. It's zinc primarily with lead and copper and silver. So why do we need these minerals? Well, I'm just going to quote something here. 41,000 roughly pounds of new minerals must be provided for every person in the United States to make the things that we use today. So just to go through a bit of that, obviously, the buildings that we work and live in use a lot of minerals and metals, coppers and zincs and steels. The automotive industry, not to mention, the up and coming EV revolution, where ultimately these minerals are going to play a significant role in reducing carbon footprints. And then moving on to, obviously technologies, the computers we're speaking on today, telephones, et cetera. And then even to make the statement that, certain minerals are necessary and included in our diets. So then just a quick discussion around Chapter 200, which is a DEP-owned process. Frankly, the Chapter 200 is the highest mining standards, and this is touted as such. The highest mining standards in North America. And frankly, they're poised to be the new standard for mining in the US and theoretically the world. All of the mining closure, rehabilitation, any potential liability associated with the project is completely funded up front. So not a shovel touches the ground unless all of those funds are within the DEP's bank account, so that if anything were to happen, it's fully funded to be managed. So as I mentioned earlier, a zero pollutant discharge. So the major thing with Chapter 200 is that there is no harm to any of the surrounding waters. So any discharge is at background quality or better. And the watershed in the surrounding area is Class A watershed. It's very clean water, good fishing grounds, and we are in our best interest to protect those receiving bodies. And we can do so, and I'll explain that a bit later. And I just wanted to mention this as well, that that along with the NRCM, that 2017 legislation was supported and obviously approved and put through. And also, there's acknowledgement that if a mine can meet these strict guidelines, which are the strictest standards in North America right now, then a mine would be safe to operate in the region. So what does the property look like? So this is, it's a simplistic map, but this shows some of the detail around what the project site would look like. So this brown line here is an existing access road to the property. It's accessed by logging roads. This is the main site. This is where all the mining and concentration, the offices are located there, some laydowns, crushing, et cetera, maintenance facilities. So that's really where the heart and soul of the project is. Up to the north of the site is the tailings facility. So tailings are essentially a byproduct of mining and concentration. So the product is the metals that we're going to sell, and then the byproduct is the gangue minerals that are left behind after we separated it. Those are tailings. This tailings facility is significantly protected, and I'll get into some of that detail a bit later. And then finally, once again, a significant, robust water treatment facility and water management facility. I will get into that in a little bit of detail, but ultimately we have, water collection and storage. And then there's a state-of-the-art water treatment facility that discharges clean water at or better than background water quality. That water, the clean water, is stored, and it's not allowed to discharge until we've tested it and proven that it achieves that quality. So once again, the design is just such that it's impossible for us to discharge water and that's below background quality. So from a time frame perspective, we're in the rezoning time frame at the moment, which is working through the Land Use Planning Commission on rezoning that small portion of the land that I discussed earlier. It was thought to be about a 1-year process, but frankly, this is a brand new process. We're the first company in here to try and operate under the 2017 legislation under Chapter 200. So I suspect that by the fall, hopefully, a 2-year time frame, that we'll have a decision, hopefully a positive decision, but a decision either way on whether we can rezone the project. After that, we get into the mine permitting phase, which is working directly with the Department of Environmental Protection. We do multiple years of detailed and robust environmental and social evaluations. So we measure all of the fish, we measure the water, we measure the air, and all of this with a robust sampling campaign. Then we come back into sort of a similar scenario that we're in today, and we present all of that detailed data to the DEP and to the public again, so that we can finally make the decision whether there should be a mine permit issued or not. If a mine permit's issued, then we get into the construction phase, about 1.5 years, and then we operate for 10 years. One thing that I wanted to note is, reclamation of the project, so the remediation cleanup, happens concurrently with operation. And that's, it does a few things there. It keeps liabilities down. It makes sure that we're not, leaving any risk on the table, or we're minimizing any liabilities that are on the property. And it allows us to prove to the public and prove to Mainers that our concepts and our designs are working and being executed properly. So here's an image of the access to underground. Now I mentioned, there's a small deposit, it's a small workings. So for scale, the vehicle in the middle of the image here is roughly the size of a half-ton truck. The opening is 32 feet wide by 64 feet long, and the tunnels are 16 foot by 16 foot. And then this is sort of the entrance to the underground workings. As we get underground, we develop these tunnels. I don't know if anyone can see my mouse, but we develop a bit of a switchback series of tunnels to access the bottom of the deposit. And then we drive tunnels into the ore body. We drill and blast it. We load it with an underground scoop, and then we load it into trucks and haul it to surface. Once it's arrived on surface, the ore then gets crushed. So first stage here, crushed, and then it gets ground down to a fine powder. Then it gets floated, and flotation separates the valuable minerals, the metals, from the gang material, the tailings. Both concentrates, the metals and the tailings, they're dewatered completely. Well, not completely, but 90% dewatered. We remove all the water from it. That water is recirculated back into the mill for processing. And then the concentrates are sold to the market for smelting. And then the tailings, like I discussed earlier, are placed on the tailings facility. The tailings facility is, I like to say it's a belt and suspenders type of design, where we have a thick primary liner built out of clay, 2 to 3 feet thick. And then we have a thick high density polyethylene or rubber liner that goes on top of that. So that's our, multiple layer linering system. And then on top of that, there's a leachate collection layer. So, if any rainwater or snow melt or any decant water comes out of the tailings, then it's immediately collected into a series of ditches. It's rerouted back into the front end of the mill, where we can use it as process water. And then after that, any excess goes to the water treatment plant, where once again, we treat back to background or better than water quality before discharging to the environment. So then the way that we discharge that to the environment is with a series of what we like to call infiltration galleries. So ultimately, these infiltration galleries, they're just a perforated pipe that the water flows into. and then it's allowed to weep out into a septic bed, basically. So by doing that, we make sure that the water gets introduced in the same manner that it's introduced today via rain and snowmelt. So it seeps into the overburdened soil, and then slowly penetrates into the bedrock, or flows downhill to sort of away from the property, I suppose. It is worth noting that each of these processes, especially related to water management, air management, et cetera, they're all monitored daily and reported regularly to the DEP and in a public format. So these are reports that are publicly available as we operate. From an impact perspective, this is really where things are very interesting. And from a technical perspective, I really love this property because it honestly has very minimal impacts, negative impacts related to the project. So we've done third-party evaluations. All of our studies are done by third-party consultants that are not directly linked to Wolfden. All of the waters and wetlands have been studied, noise, view sheds. There's a list here. I won't go through everything, but the only thing that we've shown that there could potentially be an impact is from view shed. And to be honest, it is very minimal. There's an ATV trail that runs along the north side of Mount Chase, and there's a viewpoint from there that you can see the property at. And also there's a hiking trail that hikes to the top of Mount Chase that you could potentially see, the project site from a lookout up there. Other than that, we've seen, no indications of negative impact from the project. From an employment perspective, we're looking to hire about 133 employees per day. We have a strategy and a plan to source most of that workforce from Aroostook, Penobscot counties. Now, I won't say that we're going to hire everybody off day one, 100% of employment will be from Aroostook, Penobscot counties, but we have a strategy to get there within the first couple of years of operation. And certainly, like a good percentage of that would be from locally, right off the bat. And it's because, these skill sets are very transferable between industries. I think that we can attract a lot of the workforce because of, wage. We're nearly twice the average in the region as far as paid wage. And then also, the focus for employees for us is going to be related to a really healthy work-home balance. So, the schedules that we're proposing are 7 days on and 7 days off, which means that it's really feasible for people to travel from, an hour and a half away and to come in.
Hey, Jeremy,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you wrap up in about a minute? Just in the interest
Absolutely.
of time, want to fit everything in, that'd be great. Thank you.
Definitely. Okay, thanks, Paul. So to do that, we've got a training program. We're reaching out to, the regional colleges and then getting through, training material that already exists and focusing on, these skill sets. And we're starting that now. From an economic perspective, obviously, the sources are employment, supplies, energy, and, frankly, taxes. I discussed earlier, the regions that we're focused on are Penobscot and Aroostook counties, specifically with Houlton and Millinock and Alameis. But, when you look at a tax summary, for example, it's $32 million from Wolfden, another $15 million from the employees working at the property. When you look at an overall benefits, we're looking at 303 jobs per year, which is the employees obviously, but then the multipliers from that as well. Employment earnings of 230 million, and that's within these two counties. That's a significant amount for that region. The project expenses from the company is about 310 million, and then when you consider the full economic output in the region, it's close to $700 million. Which is such a significant impact. That's ultimately what I have for you. I hope it was helpful. Obviously, we'll get to the question and answer period later, but that's what I have for you, Paul.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. That was quite informative, and seems to be a sizable project for certain, with some pretty good economic numbers in there. So,
absolutely.
Thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah. No problem.
Are you ready to go? Okay.
I bring myself back here and let's make sure I can share my slideshow. Can everybody hear me? How does that look, Paul? Can you hear me and see that okay?
Yes, that's
Okay.
great. Thanks.
Great. All right, well, needless to say, I have a very different perspective on this proposed project. My name is Nick Bennett. I'm the staff scientist for the Natural Resources Council of Maine. I've been working in Maine for 25 years, and I was a key contributor to the 2017 Maine mining law that Jeremy referenced. I helped to write a bunch of it. It was a 5-year battle to get that law through the legislature. I do agree with Jeremy that it is the toughest mining law in the country. Where I disagree with Jeremy is that I don't think this proposal could meet the requirements of that law. And I think it's important that we don't waste a lot of time looking at a project that we can pretty much tell from the beginning is not going to comply. Right now, the project, as Jeremy said, is in a rezoning posture before the Land Use Planning Commission. The Wolfden Corporation owns a bunch of territory here where it says Pickett Mountain Mine, about 8,000 acres, not far from Baxter State Park and the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. But that land is not zoned for mining. And so before they can even start a permitting process with the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a much more difficult process than rezoning, they have to get the zoning land management district changed to one that allows mining. Currently, it does not. Just to orient you a little bit more, here again in red is the project area. Pleasant Lake, Mud Lake, and Grass Pond are all state heritage brook trout waters. That means these are some of the best brook trout waters in the state of Maine. I sent folks information about these waters in my memorandum prior to the talk. I would just say that it was quite shocking in Wolfden's rezoning petition when they classified these surrounding waters of the site as warm water fisheries, shallow ponds without the ability to support cold water fish, because nothing could be farther from the truth. This is really great brook trout fishing in these waters, and it's also brook trout fishing that's accessible to the public because it's fairly low altitude and close to Route 11. So it's a very significant recreational resource that we have here, and we should be concerned about it. Just a few shots to further orient you. This is a really beautiful area. This is a shot of this one is of Pleasant Lake. Here's a picture of sunset from the top of Mount Chase. Over here is Upper Shin Pond, Lower Shin Pond. Those are important recreational resources. And this is an important place for me. I love coming here. I love to bird hunt. This is a trip that I talked my girlfriend into going with me on. And if I agree to do some hiking, she agrees to walk with me when I'm bird hunting, which is very nice company to have in addition to my dogs. We actually flushed a whole bunch of birds going up Mount Chase on this day, but it was pretty slippery on the path and hard shooting. So I actually unloaded my gun and we just hiked and went back down and did some more hunting afterwards. So why are we so worried about a mine? One of the things that mining companies will always tell you is that they're not going to pollute. And that simply isn't true. All mines pollute, period, end of story. It's not a question of if a mine will pollute, it's a question of when and how much. Mining is by far the largest emitter of toxic pollutants of any industry in the United States. It's an incredibly dangerous industry. What we are particularly afraid of with mines is something called acid mine drainage. And this is something that will happen as a result of mining in Maine. because our mining deposits are rich in sulfur. When you look for metals like zinc or copper or lead or silver, you find them in ore that is not mostly those metals, it's mostly iron sulfide. And when you dig up iron sulfide and expose it to air and water, it makes sulfuric acid. The sulfuric acid in and of itself can kill fish, and sulfuric acid also liberates the contaminants that are in the ore, things like arsenic, things like mercury, selenium. All of these things can be very toxic to fish and toxic to people as well. This is a picture of a stream in Montana called Swift Gulch, where there was a really bad case of acid mine drainage. This is another picture of it. The red color of the water is the iron that comes out of the iron sulfide, but this water is very low in pH, it's acidic, and it's got lots of other nasty metals in it too. So we're also really worried about Wolfden. I've watched Jeremy give presentations a bunch of times, and also his boss. They give very good presentations and have pretty pictures and say things like, this is the highest grade undeveloped volcanic massive sulfide deposit in America. They're quite slick, but it doesn't add up with what I know through reading regulatory documents. First of all, the Mount Chase deposit is nothing new. The Mount Chase deposit, which is what Wolfden is now calling the Pickett Mountain deposit, was discovered by companies with vastly more resources than Wolfden in the 1970s and 80s, namely Chevron and Getty. They walked away from this deposit because they didn't believe it was worth exploring further past the discovery. It's simply not a very valuable deposit. It's small, it's about 4 million tons. The classification of the ore that Wolfden has at these deposits are implied and inferred. And those are the lowest grade of deposits. So sorry, indicated and inferred. And just to give you a sense of how tiny this deposit really is, the Red Dog mine in Alaska, which is the biggest mine for zinc in the US and in the world, is an 85 million ton ore deposit. This is just not likely to compete with the large mines that are being built in the world, are being run in the world for zinc. And not surprisingly, Wolfden does not have a good financial track record. This is a company that's never developed a mine. And this is a quote from their latest financial filing. And Wolfden has accumulated a deficit of $31 million as of June 30th, 2019, since the inception of the corporation. As of June 30th, 2020, the corporation had working capital of $2.7 million. And the corporation's ability to continue as a going concern is dependent upon its ability to raise additional capital to continue the development of its mineral properties. These material uncertainties cast significant doubt on the corporation's ability to continue as a going concern. When we drafted the 2017 mining law, we said that if mining companies are going to come to Maine, they better be able to do it right. And that means they have to have a lot of technical and a lot of financial expertise. We don't think Wolfden has either, quite honestly. Wolfden, not surprisingly, this project has generated a lot of questions from Land Use Planning Commission staff. As I've said, this is a project that's in the rezoning phase in front of LUPC right now. The staff has asked Wolfden a lot of questions. One very significant one is, Wolfden, you say you're going to have zero impact to the environment and only discharge water that's as clean as natural background. Could you please give us an example of a mine that does that? I personally asked Jeremy that question when I met him about 1.5 years ago, right before the pandemic started. I never got an answer. They have used the example of the Half Mile Mine in New Brunswick, which is an inappropriate comparison to this proposal because it doesn't have any ore processing on site, which means the pollutant load that you have to deal with is much lower. It was very surprising when Wolfden said to LUPC, you should let DEP answer a lot of the questions that you're asking. And it didn't impress Chairman Worcester. He had a quite strong response to Wolfden's proposal from a New Jersey attorney to shorten this process and stop LUPC staff from asking questions. And I'm just going to quote what Chair Worcester said. He said, well, it seems to me that rather than subtly threaten us with lawsuits, you ought to be complying with the staff's requests. All right, I think we've beat this dead horse long enough. I think there's been some really insightful comments, and I think it's given Stacy and the staff courage to continue and keep insisting on what they need in order to make an informed decision. And I would encourage Wolfden to maybe be more responsive sooner rather than later. That's not the kind of thing that Chair Worcester says very often. I've watched him work a lot. That's about as excited as I've ever seen him get. He's a pretty low-key guy. What you've got here in the area where Wolfden is proposing to put a mine is a very valuable resource. Fishing, sport fishing is worth about $300 million a year to the state of Maine, and a big piece of that is brook trout. This is a map from the brook trout, Eastern Brook Trout joint venture. In red, you can see, well, first you can see on this map, this is the historic range of Eastern Brook Trout, all the way down to Tennessee. But you'll notice that a lot of the habitat in Tennessee and New York, Western New York, a lot of it's been extirpated or greatly reduced. That's the gray and the red. Mining played a big part in that. Where do we have most of that habitat? The green, the intact and predicted intact habitat. Well, the biggest block of it here is right in central northern Maine. And this is an incredibly valuable resource to the state of Maine. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. The biggest threat to brook trout you can think of is mines, because they all impact water quality. And the incredibly valuable brook trout habitat around this mine is unique to Maine, and it's a resource we think is worthy of protecting. It's a resource that's worth money and will provide sustainable jobs into the future if we take care of it. I just want to close with a quote from the folks at Chandler Lake Camps and Lodge, Jason and Sherry Bouchard, who were one of dozens of people who've commented to the Land Use Planning Commission about the problems with this proposal and their fears of the destruction it would cause to a unique part of Maine. I don't see the evidence of large-scale community support for this project, quite the opposite. This project has generated a lot of negative concern and a lot of negative reaction. Anyway, Jason and Sherry Bouchard say, the area of concern is in the headwaters of many watersheds of importance, and more specifically within the boundaries of many historical heritage waters for native Maine wild brook trout and landlocked salmon. We not only base our existence on these heritage waters, but Maine itself is one of the last safe zones for wild native brook trout and salmon. Why would we take a chance and put this valuable resource at risk? So I would urge everyone to think about that. If you feel strongly about it, as NRCM certainly does, we would urge you to contact the Land Use Planning Commission at wolfdenrezoning.lupc@maine.gov and let them know how you feel. And thank you very much to Paul and to all of you in the Aroostook Partnership for giving me and NRCM a chance to make our point here.
Well, thank you, Nick. That's certainly a different perspective, I guess, than what we heard earlier. And that's the importance of having an agenda like this, where we can present both sides of a story here. So, Jeremy, if you could come back on the picture with us, and Nick, if you could stop your screen share, we'll begin a Q&A period first, involving just Nick and Jeremy. They've had some time to come up with 2 or 3 questions, whatever we can fit in about 10 minutes here. And I'd like to start with Jeremy. You just listened to some pretty weighty concerns, I guess, from Nick. Can you, do you have any questions in particular of Nick? And we'll go back and forth and just keep it to under a couple of minutes with your answer.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate it. I guess one of the questions that has kind of come up between, colleagues and I is just around, we're curious around, what was the last or what were the most recent developments, projects that the NRCM has been in support of?
We have been supportive of many different projects. We are greatly supportive of renewable energy projects. So we've been in support of a lot of solar developments, of wind power developments. We started out in opposition to the Bucksport aquaculture project. However, DEP and that company did a really good job of addressing our concerns with that project, and we support it at this point. So that's a major project in the Penobscot watershed. We're also very supportive of the proposed development for the ski area at Moosehead Lake. We think that's a totally appropriate place for development, and it's very encouraging to, after all these years of the state and the landowner there litigating, to have such a good and hopeful project going forward there.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Nick, could you go ahead and ask a question of Jeremy if you'd like?
Sure. So I've seen a number of Wolfden videos to investors, and I've found them quite troubling. And so I'm going to ask you a few questions based on some of the things that Ron Little said in those videos.
Sure.
So one thing he said was, and this is in an October 2018 video at the Metals Investor Forum. And one thing he said is, the nice thing about Maine, there's really no trespassing law. You can go anywhere and it's at your own risk. So it's quite acceptable to be driving across somebody else's plot of land. And we're assuming too, you take a grub hoe and you dig a little hole, and that's not upsetting anybody. So you can get an idea of what's there before you have to spend a lot of time and money. So my question is, do you really think it's acceptable in Maine to dig on other people's property without permission?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I honestly, I think that's taken a little bit out of context. What Ron was, indicating at that point was that, with the exploration process in Maine, it's really, it's not a permit requirement for exploration. What it is, it's you submit a proposal, you submit a plan, and then that plan is then, we'll call it policed by the Land Use Planning Commission to ensure that, and the DEP to ensure that we're following the guidances and exploration requirements. So, just to clarify as well, when we're talking about working on, I guess, neighbors' properties and stuff like that, we don't allow and we don't perform work on our neighbors' properties without consent or anything like that. We have really great relationships with all of our neighbors, actually. So any of the work that's taking place, exploration work adjacent to Pickett Mountain or anything like that, it's done in accordance with an agreement with those landowners and neighbors that we're working with on those areas, and they've got a significant interest in success of Wolfden. And I hope that helps clarifies some of those statements that were made.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, do you have a question you'd like to ask Nick?
So actually, I guess I do have one more. I guess, Nick, you had mentioned that the NRCM was a substantial part of writing the Chapter 200, and ultimately, I think everybody around the table can agree that Chapter 200 it's very robust. And ultimately, the question for you is that, if, Wolfden is able to achieve all of the requirements, financial requirements, technical requirements, environmental requirements of Chapter 200, knowing that it's a robust legislation, is that sufficient for the NRCM to support a project at Pickett Mountain?
So as you know, Jeremy, a permitting process is a long-term process.
Absolutely.
So you have in many cases said that this project complies with Chapter 200. This project is nowhere near complying with Chapter 200. You have not supplied the kind of data necessary to give us even an inkling of whether or not you can comply with Chapter 200. And it seems highly unlikely to me that Wolfden would be able to do that. So in order for me to answer that question, I would have to see your background data. I would have to see what your permit proposal is, and then we would comment on that. If you make it through the Chapter 200 permitting process, which I think is unlikely, then yes, we would be supportive of the project.
Great, I appreciate it.
Okay. And Nick, do you have an additional question for Jeremy?
Yes, I do. So in another of the videos, and this one is a February 2021 video, where Ron Little talks about another proposal that I think Wolfden has sort of made for the Pembroke area called the Big Silver mine. He talks about how Maine is, what he specifically says is, they may go back and approve open pit mining in Maine. I can tell you that it's very rare that we have legislative majorities strong enough to override a gubernatorial veto, which is what we had with 2017, with the 2017 law. The support for that law was so strong that when Governor LePage vetoed it, the Senate and House overrode the veto. And the strongest feeling that legislators had when that law was passed in 2017 was that banning open pit mining was incredibly important for Maine. And so I would like to know why Ron Little thinks that there is even the remotest possibility that Maine is going to go back and re-allow open pit mining.
Okay, yeah, it's a great question. Ultimately, all of our forecasting and stuff like that is on Pickett Mountain right now. And I honestly, I think that Pickett Mountain is the focus of the discussion. From the perspective of, changing legislations and stuff like that, any sort of, potential, conceptual designs or anything like that, they're all associated to, the current Chapter 200 standards. Obviously, as anyone is sort of marketing or discussing any sort of property like this, you kind of, it's fun to look at different upsides and stuff like that from an economics perspective, but ultimately, we would never operate under a standard that is not in compliance with Chapter 200. Obviously, it's not law. There's no room for it, and we're unable to do that.
Okay. Yeah. So let's draw down from the one-on-one questioning here, and let's open this up to our audience. I did see, I think there were a couple of questions in the Q&A, but I wanted to review. We did have some sent ahead of time. I just want to go into those initially here. And I think some of these have been partially answered now. So I think you're spot on in some of the things you talked about. The first had to do with, this is for Jeremy. You mentioned the possibility of about 100 jobs during the mining project, many of which would seem to require mining experience. What percentage of these jobs would be occupied by experienced miners from away versus local employees? And how might that change over time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll take a moment to kind of explain. So, you're right. Mining has been removed from Maine for 2 generations now. ultimately, you know, the skill set doesn't exist other than, you know, like a few generations ago. But when you're considering the skill sets at play here, they're very similar to the industrial skill sets in northern Maine. The logging industry is very popular. Trucking industry is very popular. These are skill sets. Equipment operation are skill sets that are transferable between miners and other, you know, surface-bound industries. What we would be training for, and what we've discussed with the NMCC, for example, is a training program that allows us to upskill operators to the environment that they would be working in, an underground environment, for example. You can imagine if you can drive a loader on surface, you can certainly drive a loader underground as well. And I think it's important to note that, you know, we know the labor market that we're going to be looking for, and it's important for us to be starting that exercise now and planning with different, you know, regional community colleges. We're actually, like, I'm very excited to speak with folks because they've already got very, you know, solid ideas on how to upskill and train the communities, you know, surrounding the project. Once again, I can't commit and say that we're going to have 100% of the workforce based out of Maine. Generally, what takes place is when we start a project like this, we contract for a year or so, and then as we, you know, roll through and gain experience, then all of those operators will then convert. And even then, you know, those contractors are hiring local workforce. Not to mention the contracts. So it's not just mining contracts. There's lots of surface laborers and stuff like that, and you know, delivery and workforce that would all be, you know, contracted through Maine contracting groups, or you know, hired locally as well, that aren't necessarily, you know, mining skill set. So I think we can provide a strong complement of Maine employment right off the bat, and then we would aim to achieve, you know, a much more significant 80%, 90% complement in years, you know, let's say 2 or 3.
Okay, good. We've got another one here. This one is for you, Nick. Many of the concerns you have from the uncertainty of discharge, water quality, or contaminated water runoff coming from tailings, all potentially harming streams and fisheries. If Wolfden claims there will be no adverse water issues, then can't DEP or other federal state regulating entities verify this when the project begins and simply shut them down if they are out of compliance until they're able to get within compliance?
Well, I guess I would propose to answer that question with a question, which is how many $100 million or $1 billion facilities that get built that violate their permits do you know of that get shut down? So for example, it's quite common for pulp and paper mills to violate their discharge permits. Sometimes those violations can be extremely damaging. They don't get shut down. Once a mine is built, it's not going to get shut down. And so I think it's extremely important that we get this right up front. And I know that many things can get involved in the permitting processes, including politics and pressure and all kinds of things that are not simply based on numbers. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And especially the larger and more controversial a project is, the more complex those kind of political issues often get. So I think if we have a good idea beforehand that a project can't meet standards, we shouldn't put it in.
Right, thank you. Another one for Jeremy here. This one appears to somebody did their homework. They referenced the in the report referenced by NRCM from the Center of Science and Public Participation. They state the concern about job numbers and where the employees will come from because of the comment about everybody working at the mine living on site. Can you explain what was meant by that and how many on-site residents you would plan to employ?
Yeah, I've actually heard that one a lot. And it's honestly, that was we shot that live, and I was trying to get the words out right, and that was a bit of a mistake in my language. The plan, and basically the plan is that there's not going to be anyone housed on site. That's a nomenclature that I use just in my day-to-day. When I said housed on site, that means our accounting department, HR departments, and sort of support departments will all be working from the site location instead of having a satellite office somewhere in Patton or elsewhere. When we talk about actual housing, the intent, once again, is that we're going to be hiring local. We're not going to have housing facilities to bring people in. On the early stages, we may have some external people coming in to facilitate training and early development. And I think that's really an opportunity for Northern Maine as well, because we would be putting people up into like Holton hotels and stuff like that, where they would be able to commute from. There's no intention, and there won't be any housing units that are going up onto the property. It'll just be the working facilities only.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. And we've got one more here. This is for Nick, and then we'll move on to the some of the Q&A comments here. And I think you addressed this already, but I'm going to go through it. Maine's mining rules and regulations have become more restrictive over the years, with many new requirements added in recent years. Did NRCM provide input into these new regulations found in the Maine Metallic Mineral Mining Act, which you've answered yes, you did have input for that. And if so, is NRCM okay if all those requirements are met by Wolfden?
So the answer to that is yes and yes. The question is whether or not those requirements get met.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think you did touch on that, so that's appreciate that answer. Let's move to the Q&A here. One person has really a couple of questions here. I think this is directed at Jeremy. What were all the helicopters about? They flew over our 30 acres repeatedly.
Okay, so that's the, so there was actually a town hall meeting a few years ago, and actually, both Wolfden and NRCM spoke at that one as well. And a part of that town hall meeting was a bit of a discussion around exploration exercises that would take place on the project. One of the exploration exercises that would take place was an airborne survey. So literally a helicopter would have been flying back and forth along a grid pattern. And what they were looking for was sort of a gravitational anomaly. And so there was no risk. It was really just a flyover with a big magnet flying behind this helicopter. And then that helped us identify, where the deposit extents would get out to, as well as potentially other satellite deposits on neighboring properties, like we've discussed in the past, all of which was discussed with and agreed upon with our neighbors in adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you. And then sort of the second part to that is can Wolfden guarantee that they can mitigate a spill when it happens, both from a facility standpoint, but as well from a financial standpoint? It does not appear so at this time. I am really concerned. These are the headwaters of the Mattawamkeag River. So you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very aware and understanding of the concern related to the water surrounding the project, as well as the fisheries. For example, I actually have fished Shimpon a couple of times, and it's a lot of fun out there. And I agree that we shouldn't be risking, those types of resources, the natural resources. That's one of the beautiful things, and I got to disagree with Nick, is that like having a small project like this as our first project in the state is so important. There's no way that we would ever want to move forward with an 80 million ton project that completely decimates something when we can have this 64 foot by 32 foot opening with a sub 100 acre impact. as far as protecting against spills, all of our designs have been, done in accordance with soil scientists, environmental scientists have reviewed them, geotechnical scientists have reviewed these things, and frankly, a lot of the data is included in the petition. And as far as responding to the Land Use Planning Commission as well, we're very happy to do so and work with them. And we do have an updated petition that's being submitted shortly. So if one other thing, once again, just coming back to, chapter 200, any, potential worst case disaster scenario is accounted for before the project can start up. And the funding to reclaim any sort of spill is applied to the DEP upfront before a shovel can touch the ground. So I think it's important to note that, from multiple perspectives, from a regulated perspective and from a technical design perspective, we're very heavily protected.
Can I comment on that as well, Paul?
Sure, quick response, and then we'll move on to the final question here.
So one of the key provisions of the 2017 law is requiring enough money be put down upfront to clean up a worst case disaster. Let me just read you what LUPC staff said about the amount of money Wolfden proposed. They said the preliminary economic assessment uses a figure of 13.7 million for the Financial Assurance Trust. This figure appears low. Please provide more information on how this figure was calculated and whether the amount is sufficient to cover the financial assurance requirements under the Maine DEP's Chapter 200 rules. So I think that's very low, and I apparently am in good company. In terms of whether or not I want an 80 million ton project here, no, I don't want an 80 million ton project here. And there aren't any 80 million ton projects in Maine for metals. One of the points that I tried to make with that slide showing the deposits in Maine is that there aren't that many of them, and they tend to be pretty small and low in quality. They also tend to be dirty. They have lots of sulfur and make acid when you expose them to air and water. And Maine, notwithstanding this summer and last summer, is a pretty wet place. So it's a tough state to mine in. And I just want to say, Jeremy's mentioning that he's talked to soil scientists and work with them, but LUPC has reviewed what Wolfden has put forward, and LUPC said, based on the current record for this matter, the Land Use Planning Commission has significant concerns related to soil suitability for the proposed uses. Of particular concern are the proposals to construct wastewater storage ponds in soils that are shallow to groundwater and or bedrock, particularly if blasting will be required for pond construction, proposals to store waste rock. Oh, sorry, this is bad. I should have two screens.
Nick, in the interest of time, can you just send me the link to some of this information? I'll get as I send the link to this is being recorded, so we'll send the link to everybody and they'll be able to research this. But I do want to finish one final question here before we close up.
Okay.
So we have another question that came in about there are obviously outdoor recreation areas. They generate economic benefits through the various types of recreation and so forth, and there are many economic advantages of those activities, as well as mining, obviously. So this person's wondering if any studies have been done to compare, and I guess this is for Jeremy, to compare the economic benefits of outdoor recreational activities versus what could be done on a mine. Is there anything available or posted, or will that be undertaken later that we could perhaps share with people?
Yeah, actually, it's a really great question, and it has been asked. And so, as part of one of the recommendations or the requirements from the Land Use Planning Commission was that we do a full, Maine economist-based socioeconomic analysis. So we have done that study. It is going to be implemented into the petition update coming soon. And ultimately, yes, that it does include a trade-off of the recreational activities within the area offset against, sort of the mining, state revenues through expenses, taxes, et cetera. So, just as a fore comment, there's really little impact, if any, to recreational resources by the project. So, there is a bit of hunting, certainly ATVing and hiking trails, certainly other outdoor activities that take place there. We've been in communications from day one with all of the ATV clubs. I've been working with the Shin Pond ATV Club, Patton ATV Club, the Katahdin Lodge hosts an ATV club there, all of which are in very high support of the project, especially knowing that there's no impact to any of the trails within the footprint that we're discussing, and we're not impacting any access to any trails. And we're committed to working with ATV clubs and other, every other outdoor recreational activity to ensure that, the impact of that is negligible.
I'd just like to add quickly that in the memo I submitted, I linked to comments from Mount Chase Lodge, from Bradford camps, from the Halton Band of Maliseets and the Penobscot Indian Nation, all of whom are very concerned about what this project would do in terms of recreational impacts, particularly to fishing. And so I think that those impacts would be significant. Wolfden, actually, I'm be curious to see this socioeconomic analysis that they're doing, because the one they submitted the first time around, the consultant who reviewed it for LUPC said it was completely inadequate and they couldn't even call it a socioeconomic analysis. So it doesn't give me great comfort that we're going to be getting better information this time, but I'll try to look at it with an open mind.
Okay, well, we're running a couple minutes over here, so we'll conclude on that note. Nick and Jeremy, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and share some of these thoughts. Obviously, you've got some passion behind your positions on this project, and we appreciate you sharing those with our audience tonight here. And certainly stay in touch with me. We've got a large membership with Aroostook Partnership, as does Southern Aroostook Development Corp and the Greater Halton Chamber, and we'll gladly share information that we feel is pertinent to the residents of the area and be impacted by this. And so again, thank you for your time, and thank you for the attendees for taking the time to join us as well this evening. So other than that, enjoy your warm weather, and thanks for presenting.
Thanks everybody.